Greetings, Minecrafters, and welcome to I'm going to say dynamic, I've been saying exciting a lot, to another dynamic Minecraft discussion on all things well-being. My name is Kimberly Quinn, and it is my honor and pleasure here, it's this afternoon at the moment, to have this discussion with you, especially at this time of year, on buying your feelings, and especially at this time of year. So to begin with, we already know that we as Americans, many of us have too much stuff to begin with, right? So we really, I think, need to look at that. And probably many of you know my backstory by now, and I'll say, just remind you if that some of you maybe haven't seen it and are in the Fast Mind Club like myself, meaning ADHD, but it sounds much nicer, more positive. I did a TED Talk on this about, it's 2 years ago, right about now, I think next week, 2 years ago, and it talks about the impulse control issues that I'm constantly working on them, but have due to my fast mind, my wiring. So and I had difficulty because of that with money for a long time, not anymore, but for a long time, and it caused lots of stress and negative, in my life and marriage and things like that. So, so just quickly with that fast mind thing, and we're going to talk about buying your feelings in other ways, okay? But the impulse control, because I was kind of like the perfect storm with that, to be truthful, because I had the diminished ability to hit the pause button. And for those in the Fast Mind Club, just remember that the impulse thing, the impulse buying is not the same as shopping addiction, because that takes on a life of its own, which, though that can happen, but that's not inherent with ADHD. It's kind of like people with shopping addiction go looking for it, online and plan shopping trips. For me, it was out of sight, out of mind. If I was there with my women friends, usually I saw stuff, it was like bang, 'cause it was like the chocolate chip cookie was right there. So there's a little bit of a difference. It's a fine line, though, because it can turn into that. And before long, it becomes like a runaway train. You know what I mean? Okay, so there's the impulse control thing. And then I want to talk about, in addition to that, and for me it was a perfect storm because I had all of it. I just had all of it. So I have still the impulse control thing that I'm continually a work in progress with. And also, here's the perfect storm part, because the two biggest ones for emotional purchasing or buying your feelings, medicating your feelings in this way, are being shame-based, because there is no more I say excruciating. I'll say excruciating feeling than shame, right? Because that's the feeling of being less than, defective, flawed, damaged goods, broken, all that stuff. And many of you know, I come from an addicted upbringing. Both parents are alcoholics. One in recovery, one not so much. Last I knew, because I released them about 11 years ago. And also, there's extensions of addiction there too. But my house was loud and chaotic and violent at times, and there was just shame. Shame, as we said, I think it was yesterday, in another video, that if you have addiction in your house, shame is like the wall-to-wall carpeting, or the hardwood floors, if you want to say that, the trim around the window, the shingles on the roof, the Windex on the window. It's just shame is just sort of woven right through the an addicted family situation. That does not have to be the case, though. You can have shame without addiction. So, and shame breeds more shame, because it's so excruciatingly painful. Often parents, without knowing, because this is a defense mechanism. When we talk about projection, that's an unconscious defense mechanism. We're talking about in the Freudian sense, which means unconscious means they're not aware they're doing it. That doesn't give them a pass either, but because it's so painful, excruciating, they project it onto their kids, and then so on and so on and so on, and there goes the cycle. So at this time of year, when shame does this kick, kickback, where if it was, you had it kind of mellowing out, and then now it's the holidays, it's in full swing again, because it can get stirred up very easily at this time of year. It becomes super easy, especially with all the bling bling and advertising, just all over the place, wherever you look, right? There's all kinds of stuff, just saying, notice me, notice me, notice me. I can make you happy, bling 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 bling. So anybody who's feeling broken from the emotion of shame, the materialism out there and the purchase power thing is like just like catnip. Okay, so there's the shame based thing, and also deprivation based. So, I mean, I have a friend who's a professor now and super successful, and I've actually more than one person has shared this with me, truthfully. And you never know by looking at them now. I mean, they're just they're doing really well. And she grew up in severe poverty in the Northeast Kingdom area of Vermont. And so, and it isn't her that I'm talking about with the shopping thing. I just thought of it that that's a situation where that could happen, being deprived, as a child, not having stuff and seeing what other kids have, that can play into it. But my kind of deprivation, we came from a very middle class existence. So from the outside looking in, they probably thought the Quinns were doing great, unless they were too close, because occasionally the neighbors must have known because stuff was flying out the windows and things like that. But for the most part, who would have known necessarily? So the deprivation I had, or the scarcity, I'm going to get into another episode just on that, was, emotionally, I was just so deprived of love, actually. I just cut right to the chase. I was deprived of love, and it didn't get that early on, as a young adult, and then married kids, and then we have 5, as mentioned. After about maybe like early on, first or second child, with Christmas, I would just overdo. And here's the thing, I became aware of that pretty quickly, and I still couldn't stop it. To be truthful with you, I still couldn't stop it because the reason is the wounds underneath, even though I was aware of them, the wounds underneath at that time were still bleeding. And so, it was my, was and is my mission in life, one of my missions in life, to be the very best mother I can, and blend it into all the authentic ways you can be a great mother, was that materialism thing at Christmas. And I, again, aware of it, and it was so hard for me to shut it off, because I wanted them, I had been so deprived myself that I just had to try to fill that up. And so, in actually one of my books, my third book, A Full Moon Rising in the Tao of Menopause, actually, I had fun writing that one. I talk about this as soul hole filling, because those are the wounds that we just feel the need to medicate. But here's the thing, it's like taking a watering can, filling it up with water to try to, water your nice new flower beds, and there's a hole in the bottom. So you have to keep filling it, and it keeps running out, and you get a little bit of a dope fix. The flowers are getting something, right? We don't drink because it doesn't feel good. We don't shop because it doesn't feel good either. It's still like a happiness fix, but of course there's not really happiness, really. It's just this, sort of immediate gratification, and it's temporary, kind of like a vampire bite. Like if you ever saw Twilight, they're like, it's kind of like fleeting. When they don't get their full fix. When they do get their full fix, it still lasts a little longer, but it's still fleeting. It doesn't last, just like any other kind of, however we try to self-medicate, because it is what we're doing when we're buying our feelings. So we have deprivation-based and shame-based. I had, in addition to the impulse control with my, just genetic wiring that I couldn't help anymore than having brown eyes, until I became aware and then started to do something about it. And that's because it's different. Once we're aware, we have responsibility, Dr. Dave. So I've been working on that for years, and I'm like all set with that now. Although I still keep paying attention, because you got to pay attention forever, kind of like being a diabetic. I mean, I don't know what else to make an analogy to. You got to manage it. Like people are in recovery. It's, you're still paying attention. Work in progress. So we can, if we're deprivation-based and shame-based, I've got both of those, right? So I was just like self-medicating away for a long time with the impulse thing. I didn't really go looking for it, but when it came this time of year, it was really just this time of year mostly, that I would just overdo. And then we've got people who have suffered losses lately, and grieving's intense. We were talking about that just a few days ago when I was in Medford, Massachusetts. And anybody's experienced loss might land in the purchase power, buying feelings trap, because for a short while we can have just a little bit of satisfaction. Obviously, it doesn't bring the person back, or the change in relationship back, or the limb back, or whatever it is back. However, it does give us, a little bit of a feel-good fix. And then we've got loneliness, which I think we mentioned this in another one. Maybe, well, if we did, I don't remember. Loneliness right now, in case you don't know, is right up there in the United States has been bumped up to being right up there with smoking and obesity for the leading cause of death in the United States. Loneliness. So think about that. So there are, it's just another way to medicate in addition to the alcohol, other drugs, sex, eating, a lot of emotional eating going on too. So obviously this isn't with judgment, since I just told you I was wrapped up in it for a while, earlier on in our marriage. Impulsivity combined with deprivation-based, combined with shame-based, growing up with all that turmoil in my life. I'm also not saying to blame. I'm not a blamer anymore. We've all had moments of blame, I think, right? But to just become aware of why you're purchasing, or and also to hit it. It sounds kind of ironic, as it is, I guess, to hit the pause button when you're out there, which it continues to be hard for me. If you know it's going to be hard for you, don't go. Don't go, or don't go on the internet if you're having a particularly hard day. Like for me, if I'm having like an ADHD day, which is a thing, by the way. Like I wake up like this every day, but there are certain days where I just feel faster, more impulsive, like it just like anything else, right? And if you know you're having an ADHD day or fast mind day, that's a great, sort of that awareness is a great time to say, I'm not going to go on the internet, and then buying stuff. I'm not going to go to the store. If you're having a particularly down, low day because you're grieving and you experience some loss, or you're depressed, you're having a really tough time that day with depression and or anxiety, whatever it is. It's not a good time, to go out to the stores and hit the pause button, because it's really important to question ourselves, just like with eating or drinking or codependent relationships aren't different either. Those are relationship addicts, right? And so when there's a codependent, of course, codependent behavior spectrum doesn't have to mean full-fledged addiction, but that is what that is. That's what we're talking about. So to really just question what the intention is. It's so important to question the intention, because if you can, usually you don't have to overthink it. Usually the intention kind of is like, we might want to push it down because we really do know and don't want to admit it to ourselves. But that's really the best way to get a handle on this, is the awareness, because only when we have because we can't do what we don't know. We've said that a lot. Once we do know, however, we do have that responsibility, and there are things we can do, like not going out to the stores, not going on the internet. And if you feel like, let's say you're me with impulse control issues, if you have a partner, great, you can say to him or her or them, honey, I'm having a really hard day today. It's not your responsibility, it's mine. But if you could just help me not do something I'll regret today, because I'm just this close, just like an alcoholic would, with a newly recovering alcoholic would with a sponsor. Maybe they're doing really, really well, but they're going to a festivity where there's going to be alcohol there, and they're feeling pretty good, but maybe not totally. Well, can you talk to me on the phone for a while, or again, not go. And the other thing is, there's also a positive psychology thing. Another thing you can do, which I'm a huge fan of, is rather than spending money on stuff, spend it on an experience, because it slows it down a little bit. Unless you just hit send on a Mediterranean cruise, I guess. But if you because you put a lot of thought into it, what that child really would love to do, and also it also encourages the one-on-one attention, or maybe it's a whole family thing or whatever. But to spend money on an experience is such a great idea. I was also, lastly, I'm trying to keep these at 15 minutes. Another thing I was reading I forget where, though, I have to give them credit. Well, I might have to give credit in the next video because I don't remember what it was. I think it was the magazine Simple, but I'm not sure. One thing that these two parents did with their kids is they really trimmed it down, and the kids got 3 presents each from Santa, and then they were given money to give away as little kids. So they grew up like that. And I guess the first year, well, I don't forget where they started with this. So I'm just going to say, like, I don't know, 6, 8, and 10 or something. I'm making that up because I don't know. But they sounded in the article like they kind of knew. And it said as it kept going on year after year that they actually got excited to give this to let's say the Boys and Girls Club or to the wherever. So that's also very cool. So remember, we're going to recap. Awareness. We can't do what we don't know. Hit the pause button. Reach out for support. Spend money on experiences. Give money to kids to give away. And yeah, that's our chat on trying to or supporting you and not buying your feelings. Have a mindful day.